Dancing plague. The dancing plague was the first and last of its kind and began in July 1518 in Strasbourg when Mrs. Trophia started dancing in the street. Within a week, she was joined by dozens of others, and within a month, the number had swelled to around 400 people. The dancers seemed to be in a trance-like state, unable to stop or rest even after days of continuous dancing. Many of them eventually danced themselves to death from exhaustion, heart attacks, or strokes. The authorities of Strasbourg tried various methods to stop the plague, including hiring musicians and opening dance halls, but nothing seemed to work. Historians and scientists have proposed various theories to explain the dancing plague of 1518, including mass hysteria, psychological distress, ergot poisoning from contaminated rye grain, or religion. Ergotism, not a widespread disease as it was then due to better sanitation and hygiene, but if you were a medieval peasant who just so happened to eat the wrong piece of bread at the wrong time, you were in for one hell of a ride. Ergotism is a severe condition caused by ingesting toxins from the ergot fungus, which grows on rye and other cereal grains. Ergotism outbreaks frequently occurred in the Middle Ages before modern food storage and milling practices. Damp storage conditions allow the ergot fungus to multiply on grain supplies. Consuming ergot-contaminated rye or rye products exposed populations to the toxins. Due to severely restricted blood flow, it caused intense burning, cold sensations, and rotting of the extremities like fingers, toes, ears, and nose. The affected areas turn dark and die, sometimes requiring amputation. This disease was sometimes historically misinterpreted as bewitchment, and some people would be hanged on the belief they were wizards or witches. Cholera. Nothing ever said Victorian England like coal mines, starving children, and Vibrio cholera. Cholera is a diarrheal infection caused by the bacterium Vibrio cholerae. It was usually acquired by ingesting food or water contaminated with the bacterium. The main route of cholera transmission is fecal contamination of water sources used for drinking or food preparation. Overcrowded conditions with poor sanitation of times, like in England in the 19th century, gave the bacteria insane numbers of the population to infect. A 2-year outbreak caused a devastating impact, claiming an estimated 52,000 lives across England and Wales. In London, it was the worst outbreak in the city's history, with a death toll exceeding 14,000. Cholera is a significant issue in poorly developed countries. Cholera causes profuse, watery diarrhea, vomiting, and rapid dehydration. If untreated, severe fluid depletion can lead to shock and death within hours. The relentless diarrhea and vomiting quickly cause rapid visible dehydration. The patient's eyes become sunken, their mouths dry out completely, and intense thirst sets in as their body desperately tries to replace fluids. Their skin may take on a shriveled, tinted appearance when pinched due to lack of elasticity from fluid loss. As dehydration worsens, the patient's blood pressure drops dramatically due to the depleted fluid volumes in the bloodstream. This shock puts extreme strains on the organs. Without intervention, the skin may turn bluish as vital organ systems fail due to a lack of blood flow and oxygen. Death would often happen in 24 hours if left untreated with IV fluids and antibiotics. Typhoid fever. Mary Milan, better known as Typhoid Mary, was an asymptomatic carrier of typhoid fever in the early 20th century. Mary Milan was a cook for wealthy families in New York in the 1900s. Despite showing no signs of illness herself, she spread the deadly typhoid fever bacteria to dozens of people she served food to. The typhoid fever would begin gradually with fatigue, weakness, stomach pains, and a mild fever. The fever becomes very high as the illness progresses over the following weeks, potentially reaching 104 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. As the disease progresses without treatment, patients may experience a range of severe symptoms, including delirium, mental fog, and extreme fatigue, sometimes advancing to a stupor. Moreover, untreated infections can cause gastrointestinal bleeding, manifesting as bright red or maroon stools, a direct consequence of intestinal ulcerations. Yellow fever. Yellow fever gets its name from one of the most distinctive and recognizable symptoms it can cause: jaundice, which gives the skin and whites of the eyes a yellowed appearance. When major yellow fever outbreaks occurred in the Americas in the 18th and 19th centuries, this apparent yellow skin discoloration became an unmistakable sign of the deadly disease for doctors, with fatalities estimated to range from 100,000 to 150,000 deaths. Yellow fever begins with a sudden onset of fever, chills, severe headache, muscle and body aches, and a general feeling of illness. The fever climbs rapidly, potentially reaching as high as 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Patients become tired and weak, losing their appetite and feeling nauseous. After several days of high fevers and flu-like symptoms, many experience a brief remission, during which the fever subsides and they feel somewhat improved, though still exhausted. However, this would often be a cruel lie, as around 15% of patients then enter a more toxic phase within a day. In the toxic phase, the fever returns with a vengeance and can spike even higher than in the initial stage. The high fever, combined with dehydration from vomiting, abdominal pain, and an inability to take in fluids, leads to rapid deterioration. The skin and eyes may take on a distinctive yellow jaundiced hue as liver damage advances, giving the disease its name. As yellow fever progresses, bleeding problems emerge, with blood appearing in vomit, the oral cavity, eyes, and other orifices. Liver and kidney failure set in with decreased urination. Before modern treatments, the majority of those entering the toxic phase would die due to the rapid multi-organ deterioration within 2 weeks of the initial symptoms. River blindness. River blindness is a parasitic disease transmitted through the bites of infected black flies. These flies breed in fast-flowing rivers and streams, hence the term river blindness. Once infected black flies bite humans, they deposit the larvae of Onchocerci volvulus under the skin. These larvae develop into adult worms, which can live for up to 15 years in the human body. The adult worms produce millions of microscopic larvae, which migrate through the skin and other tissues. When the microfilariae die, they trigger an inflammatory response, leading to severe itching, skin lesions, and eventual blindness. The biggest symptom of river blindness is severe itching, which can be debilitating and often leads to scratching, causing skin damage and secondary bacterial infections. Over time, repeated exposure to the parasite can lead to irreversible eye damage and blindness, hence the name river blindness. River blindness primarily affects rural communities in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly in regions where black flies breed near fast-flowing rivers and streams. The disease is closely linked to poverty and limited access to healthcare, as affected populations often lack resources for preventative measures and treatment. Dysentery. The severity of yellow fever can be grasped by the fact that even American soldiers, known for their bravery in facing musket fire, referred to it with dread as Bloody Christ and a putrid monster. The illness's impact on colonial America cannot be overstated. It killed thousands in horrific and painful ways. Dysentery is an intestinal inflammation caused by bacteria or parasites, leading to frequent mucus passage and bloody stools. For early American settlers and troops, poor sanitation and contaminated food and water supplies allowed dysentery to spread rampantly. The symptoms began with griping, abdominal cramps, and tenderness in the lower belly as the intestinal lining became inflamed. This progressed to agonizing straining and the urgent need to defecate persistently. However, instead of providing relief, each bowel movement produced severe abdominal pain and the discharge of bloody, mucus-filled stools. The disease was quite literally shredding your insides, and you were forced to watch in agony as all you could do was hope you were part of the 40% who would survive without modern medicine. As dysentery wore on, those infected endured constant fatigue, dehydration, fever, nausea, and vomiting from the relentless expulsion of fluids. The gut-wrenching cramps, chills, and painful straining could last for weeks or months. Severe cases caused the body to become thin as it wasted away. Scurvy. Unlike other diseases, the lack of simple vitamin C caused this. However, it didn't just affect anyone, because as long as you lived on land, your body would naturally crave what it lacks, like fruits and vegetables. Sailors afflicted by a particular disease endured prolonged periods at sea with a limited diet consisting mainly of hardtack biscuit bricks and salted beef jerky, so they barely had any source of the vitamin. Without this essential nutrient, the body cannot correctly produce collagen, a vital protein that binds cells together. This leads to a breakdown of connective tissues. The initial symptoms began with general weakness, feeling tired, and unusual bruising on the skin. As scurvy progressed further, psychological changes set in, like feeling depressed and unmotivated. In the advanced stages, hemorrhages would cause further bleeding from virtually any area. Under the skin, in the eye sockets, from the nose, mouth, old scurvy sores, and other orifices. The pain became severe and constant. Fever, nerve damage, jaundice, and eventual heart failure made scurvy inevitably fatal if untreated. On long ocean voyages before the 1800s, sailors and explorers were completely susceptible when their stored provisions ran out of vitamin C. Scurvy decimated entire crews, disabling ships at sea. Vasco da Gama lost 116 of 170 men to scurvy during his voyage, and the British Anson lost over 600 of 900 sailors to scurvy in 1741. Guinea worm disease. Guinea worm disease is a parasitic infection caused by the roundworm. It's transmitted when people drink water contaminated with water fleas, cyclops, that carry the larvae of the guinea worm. Once ingested, the larvae mature and mate in the human host's abdomen. The female worms, which can grow up to 2 to 3 feet in length, then migrate to the skin's surface, usually on the lower limbs, creating painful blisters. When the blisters burst, the worm releases its larva into the water, perpetuating the cycle. Guinea worm disease is not usually fatal, but can cause painful symptoms, including fever, nausea, vomiting, and intense pain. The worm's emergence from the skin can also lead to secondary bacterial infections and long-term disability. The disease primarily affects rural communities in parts of Africa, particularly those with limited access to clean drinking water and proper sanitation. Efforts to control guinea worm disease have focused on providing clean drinking water, educating communities about prevention measures, such as filtering drinking water and preventing infected individuals from entering water sources, and implementing surveillance and contaminant measures to interrupt the transmission cycle. As a result of these efforts, guinea worm disease has been significantly reduced, with a dramatic decrease in the number of reported cases over the past few decades. Gout. Gout is a form of arthritis with sudden and severe attacks of pain, redness, swelling, and tenderness in the joints, most commonly affecting the big toe. It is caused by the accumulation of urate crystals in the joints due to high uric acid levels in the blood. Gout primarily affected large feudal lords who consumed red meat and alcohol daily, unlike peasants. High purine foods and drinks such as organ meats, seafood, and sugary beverages elevate uric acid levels, causing gout. Uric acid is a waste product that forms when the body breaks down purines, which are substances found in certain foods and beverages. Usually, uric acid dissolves in the blood and is excreted from the body through urine. However, if the body produces too much uric acid or the kidneys cannot eliminate enough of it, urate crystals can accumulate in the joints, triggering gout attacks. Gout attacks often occur suddenly, typically at night, and can be extremely painful, with the affected joint becoming swollen, hot, and tender to the touch. The pain and discomfort can be debilitating, making it difficult to walk or even stand.